Al Jazeera, Hollywood.
This is Al Jazeera, and these are the stories making headlines. Amateur footage has emerged showing Saif al-Islam, one of Gaddafi's sons, encouraging supporters to fight for his father. It's unclear when and where the pictures were taken, but in it, Saif al-Islam tells the people that enemy forces are spreading rumors. He also tells them he's brought reinforcements, food and weapons. Now, the city closest to Libya's capital has been seized by anti-Gaddafi protesters, but demonstrators in Zawiya believe Libyan troops on the outskirts are preparing a counterattack. On Sunday, hundreds of people gathered in the city center to celebrate taking control of it. The U.S. Secretary of State is in Geneva ahead of a UN Human Rights Council meeting on Libya. Hillary Clinton arrived in Switzerland late Sunday. The United States has been vocal in its condemnation of Gaddafi's regime, calling on the Libyan leader to respect his people's wishes and leave now. Tunisia's interim prime minister has stepped down. Al-Beji Kaid Sepsi will succeed Mohamed Ghannouchi, who resigned on Sunday. It follows renewed violence in the capital, Tunis, prior to his departure. Oman's health minister says one person was killed in anti-government protests on Sunday, although staff at a local hospital have told the Reuters news agency that 6 were killed. More than 2,000 protesters gathered in the industrial center of Sohar on Sunday, demanding political reform. Police used tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse them. In Bahrain, the U.S. President Barack Obama has welcomed government moves to reshuffle its cabinet to appease demonstrators. Thousands of people marched through the capital against the monarchy on Sunday for a third week. 2 soldiers have been killed and 4 wounded in an attack on a military checkpoint in the Yemeni town of Abiyan. Opposition parties say they plan to join anti-government protests to pressure the president to step down. President Ali Abdullah Saleh has called in his army generals and ordered them to defend the unity of the country. New Zealand's Prime Minister says 2 major earthquakes since September are likely to cost about $15 billion. Last week's quake in Christchurch killed at least 148 people. At least 50 others are still missing. Funerals are being held for some of the victims on Monday. There'll be more news at the top of the hour. Right now, it's Worldview on Al Jazeera. Stay with us.
Hello, I'm Kamal Santamaria and welcome to a special collaborative interview here on Al Jazeera between us and you. We're here in Muscat, the Omani capital, to speak to the UK's Prime Minister David Cameron. The only difference this time, though, is that you've submitted the questions. It's part of the YouTube Worldview program, where one world leader is interviewed every month, and the questions are submitted through YouTube by you. A series of international and domestic policy questions, videos and texts, which we then put to David Cameron on your behalf. Prime Minister, thank you so much for your time. The format of our interview is we've got all the questions in from viewers around the world. They've sent in text questions, they've sent in video questions, and we've split it up into some foreign policy, some domestic policies. We hope to cover a nice broad range of things. First question, it's a video question, and it's, I think, very important at this moment. It's an international one. It's about the situation of the uprisings that we've seen in the Middle East. So let's have a look.
David, my question is this. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen civilians being killed and beaten in the streets in several Middle Eastern countries using weapons that were sold to them by British companies. And my question is, how do you justify going this week on a tour of North African and Middle Eastern countries with several representatives from weapons companies with the aim of selling those governments yet more weapons, which we know will probably be used against their civilian population?
So he's essentially asking, you're sending mixed messages about Britain's role in the Middle East?
Not at all. First of all, what I've been saying on this trip this week is the importance of supporting the aspirations of people in North African and Arab countries who want greater democracy, greater freedom, greater rights. That is why I started my trip in Cairo, in Egypt, meeting with the government, also meeting with the protesters and saying that I supported their aspirations and having discussions with that government to try and get them to focus on a proper transition to a real civilian government and genuine democracy in Egypt. On the issue of trade and on defence, we have some of the toughest controls anywhere in the world for selling defence equipment to other countries. I don't think that trade is wrong in every circumstances. After all, how can we expect a small country to manufacture and make all the things it needs to defend itself? One of the countries I went to, and one of the countries where we have sold defence equipment in the past and probably will in the future, is Kuwait, a country that actually does have a level of democracy, and also a country that was invaded by its neighbour Saddam Hussein. So I don't accept this argument that it's wrong in all circumstances to support the sale of defence equipment. But as I say, Britain, unlike many other countries, has extremely tough controls. And as for whether there is evidence about this equipment has been used, I haven't seen that evidence. So I disagree, I think, with most parts of that question.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. We'll move on. The next question is a text question. It's on a similar line. They're going back and using Yugoslavia as an example to compare to Libya. In 1999, NATO bombed Yugoslavia because Yugoslav security forces were responsible for crimes against humanity and massive human rights abuse against the cost of our civilian population. Doesn't the UK, as a founder of NATO, find Libya's authorities are doing the same thing?
Well, let me be clear. I think what Libya's authorities are doing is completely unacceptable. This violence, this meting out of vicious, brutal repression, including using aeroplanes, including troops on the streets, including live ammunition, is completely unacceptable, and it must stop. And I completely back what Barack Obama said last night about this. And these actions, yes, they must have consequences. Consequences in the UN Security Council, consequences for those responsible for them. And we should, as Barack Obama said, look at the full range of options in terms of doing that. And people in Libya need to think extremely carefully about what they are doing, because those actions, yes, they should have consequences.
So in relation to that question, you wouldn't draw any parallels between intervention in Yugoslavia years ago and intervention in Libya?
I would condemn human rights abuses and the repression against by governments of their people wherever they happen, Libya included, and all our minds at the moment are focused on that country, and quite rightly so. And what we've seen on our television screens, what is happening on the streets of Tripoli and elsewhere, is completely unacceptable, and it must stop. And as I'm absolutely clear, and if it does not stop, there will be consequences.
Okay then, one more international question before we move to domestic issues.
I want to ask Mr. David, my question will be about England strategy. Why you, democracy, do not respect the winning of Islamic parties in Arabic countries' elections?
Right, the audio wasn't brilliant on that one, but he was essentially saying, why are you not engaging more with Islamic parties who do win elections in this part of the world? I guess from Gaza he's referring to the likes of Hamas. He might even allude to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt.
I think the point I'd make in Egypt is that I had the opportunity to go and meet people who had protested in Tahrir Square, people who wanted a genuine democracy in Egypt. And one of the points they made to me is that all too often our government or the international community has just gone straight to the Muslim Brotherhood and has not talked to the other people of opposition parties or people who want to set up parties. And their argument was, we need more time, we need more help to make sure this is a genuine open democracy for the future, rather than just a choice between an autocratic regime on the one hand or Islamic parties on the other. And so I made a conscious decision to go and see the non-Islamic opposition to actually talk to them about what they want in the future of Egypt. And I think that is the right thing to do.
So allowing new groups to flourish.
Absolutely.
Okay then, let's move on to some domestic issues. We'll start with the video.
Hello Mr Cameron, my name's Neil Garrett and my question to you is this. You and your government seem to be rather intent on making an all-out assault on public services in this country and inflicting a level of cuts on the poor and vulnerable members of our society, all the while ignoring a rather large elephant in the room, which is the obscene profits that the financial sector are making and the complete lack of taxes that they're paying this country. So in that case, why are you letting the banking sector get away with this behaviour, and why are you inflicting this level of cuts and damage on our society, and particularly on the poor people in our society?
Well, let me answer Neil very directly. First of all, what he says about our assault on public services is just quite simply wrong. If you take the most important public service of all, the National Health Service, We are not cutting that service, we are increasing spending on that service. And that is the service that poor and vulnerable people depend on more than anything else. So first of all, I completely reject the premise of his question. The question he asked, why are we having to make cuts at all? Well, it was because of the complete and utter mess the economy was left in by the last Labour government, who left us with the biggest budget deficit anywhere in the developed world. People sometimes talk about the problems faced by Greece or by Portugal. Our budget deficit, when I became Prime Minister, was bigger than the one in Greece, bigger than the one in Portugal. It is Labour's mess that we're having to clear up, and that does mean making some spending reductions. Now, as for his question about taxing the banks, unlike the last Labour government that refused to act before other countries acted, we have introduced a bank levy that will raise over £10 billion in this Parliament. So under our arrangements with the banks will pay more in tax, they will do more lending, particularly to small businesses, and they will have a smaller bonus pool this year. Those are achievements that the last Labour government completely failed to achieve. Now, it is difficult making these spending reductions, and we are trying to do it in as fair a way as possible. And if you look at our budget and our spending round, it's actually the better off in our country who will pay more, both in cash terms and as a percentage of their income, in order to clean up the mess that we were left by Labour.
So on the premise of what Neil was saying about the banks, though, you feel that the banks are quote-unquote being punished enough. He was basically saying the banks should be punished. Are you saying that they are being punished enough?
I want them to pay more in tax. They will pay more in tax. But the point I make is this. We do need an economic recovery. And to get a recovery, you need banks to lend money. So if you have a choice in politics, you can go on and on and on about punishing the banks, or you can do what we've done, which is actually get more tax out of them, get more revenue out of them, so they will be paying more into the exchequer. And at the same time, we've got them lending more money to business. That's what we want.
Right, let's move on to our next question, a text one. Respected Prime Minister, what are the ways and methods your government is taking to reduce the unemployment rate for recent graduates, for both national and international graduates? This is a hot one because you've got so many people coming out of university and going, I don't have a job, I can't find a job.
Well, I feel for those people because it is extremely difficult at the moment, and we have seen, regrettably, a rise in unemployment. The most important thing we can do is get the economy growing. I mean, that is how we get jobs going, by making sure government is keeping the corporate taxes down, which we're doing. We're going to have the lowest corporate tax rate anywhere in the G7 to attract businesses in, to encourage business investment. That is the most important thing that we can do. And what's happening in Britain is a rebalancing of our economy. For years, we were too reliant on one industry, finance, in one corner of the country, the south of England. We need a rebalancing of the economy towards manufacturing, investment, exports, business growth across the country. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here in the Gulf this week. I'm determined to link Britain up to the fastest growing countries of the world, taking business investment and businesses to China, to India, here in the Gulf, to help our economy grow. That's the best thing we can do for graduates. The other thing is to make it easier for businesses to take people on. That is about simplifying taxes, simplifying regulation, encouraging businesses to grow. And that's exactly what we're doing.
So in answer to the question there, which was asking what's being done specifically, your argument is fix the economy, the jobs will follow.
Fix the economy, help business invest, take regulation off business, give businesses low tax rates. In the end, it is businesses that create jobs. Government can't create long-term jobs in the private sector. It is businesses that do that, and we've got to make the atmosphere for business better so they can expand and they can grow.
Okay then, let's move on. Next question. I think it's another text one. It is. This was, incidentally, the second most popular question because viewers would submit questions and then members of the public would vote. Why is marijuana illegal when alcohol and tobacco are more addictive and dangerous to our health, but we manage to control them? Would an education about drugs from a younger age be better?
Well, there's one bit of that question I agree with, which I think education about drugs is vital, and we should make sure that education programs are there in our schools, and we should make sure that they work. But I don't really accept the rest of the question. I think if you actually look at the sort of marijuana that is on sale today, it is actually incredibly damaging, very, very toxic, and leads to, in many cases, huge mental health problems. But I think the more fundamental reason for not making these drugs legal is that to make them legal would make them even more prevalent and would increase use levels even more than they they are now. So I don't think it is the right answer. I think a combination of education and also treatment programs for drug addicts, I think those are the two most important planks of a proper anti-drug policy.
But the argument that it could be used as medicinal properties, that was another question we actually had, a person saying it's got proven medicinal properties, if used properly and regulated properly, could actually be quite helpful.
That is a matter for the science and medical authorities to determine, and they are free to make independent determinations about that. But the question here about whether illegal drugs should